I couldn't believe my eyes. Matt and Susan hugging in front of everyone, as if nothing out of the ordinary was going on. How dare she? I was just seething with indignation. I mean, everyone knows Matt's mine. I've been in love with him since the 5th grade. He even told me he loved me at Barbara's party. And now, this betrayal? No, I wasn't going to let this go. I walked confidently towards Matt and Susan, not knowing exactly what I was going to do, but I could feel myself boiling with anger. Hi, my name is Alex, and after the fight with Susan, I was forced to take anger management classes. Everyone who stood in my way promptly hid in the corners. The sweet couple made out without noticing anyone around. Hey, you two traitors! I yelled. There was silence in the classroom. Matt turned around and stared at me fearfully. He knew what I was capable of when I was angry. Susan was a newcomer to our class. She still didn't know me well and didn't understand anything yet. "Why are you so attached to me, monster? Back off!" she said, continuing to hug Matt with one hand. I was definitely not going to endure this, and I pounced on her like a panther. Matt jumped to the side, and a fight broke out between me and Susan. Matt tried to break us up, but I accidentally elbowed him in the stomach, and he crouched down in pain. Susan started screaming at the top of her lungs. "Help! I was attacked by a mad woman!" She wasn't exactly an experienced fighter, and simply put her arms out in front to protect her face. The teachers came running at the scream, and we were finally separated. I managed to give Susan a big black eye and pulled out some strands of her hair. She looked like an abandoned puppy in bad weather. I was pleased with myself. I was good. But the director had a different opinion. In his office, he said, without raising his tone, "So, young lady." "I'm not a lady," I snapped. "Okay, young non-lady. You have two options. Either you will be expelled from school for beating a student, or you will go to anger management class." I stared at him, not knowing whether he was joking or was being serious. What classes? I didn't like either one. "Anger management. This is not the first time you've been aggressive. Simon, Monica, Tommy, we've been over this. I've talked to you, but nothing has changed as far as I can see." I shifted nervously in my chair, mentally referring to the list of my crimes. Yeah, I hadn't done Tommy right. He just made a bad joke, but the rest of them deserved it. Simon thought it was very funny that my phone wasn't the latest brand. Monica decided to make a caustic comment about my new hoodie. What was I supposed to do? Listen in silence? Of course not. I piled on them so that now they will keep their opinion, which nobody needs to themselves. The principal went on. "So this time, we'll do it differently. You'll attend Mr. O'Leary's classes during the vacations, and only after that can you go back to school." The principal smiled sardonically and leaned back in his chair. I could feel that smile making my insides boil. It took a lot of effort to extinguish that anger. It was a teacher, not poor Tommy after all. "Okay," I agreed grudgingly. "Now, shoo," the headmaster said, pointing to the door. Ever since I was a kid, I had a hard time keeping my emotions in check. If I heard any insults about me, I didn't hesitate to rush into a fight. After a while, everyone who laughed at me, and even those who weren't going to, were afraid to mess with Crazy Alex and avoided me. Crazy Alex is a great nickname. Now it seems offensive to me, but then I was even proud to keep everyone at bay. Every time I got close to someone, the same thing happened. As soon as the person made even a small mistake, I would immediately jump on them and our budding friendship would end. I put up with my loneliness and my constant anger. I guess I just had more energy than a teenager needs. It was only when an unpleasant situation arose that the very same energy flew out of me like a steam from a teapot. How many admonitions, advice, and threats I heard from parents and teachers during that time. They all said that by the time I was 17, I would definitely go to jail if I didn't learn to control myself. But these conversations made me even angrier. Not at anyone in particular. I was angry at the whole world. But today, for example, Susan was the focus of this anger. After she stole my math, the only thing I could think about was revenge. One bruise and a couple of torn out scraps weren't enough for me. The anger management class, whatever it was held in the library building. There were 5 lucky people who had, in quotation marks, the perfect opportunity to study with Mr. O'Leary.
Allison Reynolds is the local princess. She came from a wealthy family and looked down at everyone, wore expensive pink clothes. Well, straight from the cover of gaudy fashion magazines. Andrew Clark was the school bully. Andrew was a male version of myself. He couldn't help himself either and was always getting in trouble. He wore a long cape and army boots. John Bender was a soccer star. Almost the whole school carried him around their arms like he was some kind of god. Ryan Johnson is a nerd. The diligent student who always wore green sweaters and beige pants. I understood why Andrew and I were here. But what about the rest of them? They were normal teenagers. And at the head of this gang is Mr. O'Leary. It was obvious right away that he wasn't interested in us at all. In every class, he wrote essays on why it's important to be kind, or the consequences of negative perceptions and stuff like that. And Mr. O'Leary would take out his sandwich box and go off somewhere. We were alone for a few hours. At first, everyone was quiet. Andrew was carving something on the table with a knife. The paper Mr. O'Leary had given him was crumpled up, and for some reason, he ate it. Allison was chewing gum and twirling a strand of beautiful shiny hair around her finger. John was doing push-ups or squats, and only Brian was diligently writing an essay. I looked at it all and thought, that's what they're spending money on? For 5 teenagers to just do nothing for hours? But it turned out that it was worthwhile to write this stupid essay at least once. When Mr. O'Leary discovered that we hadn't done anything, he said, "All right, we'll extend your punishment another week, and if you don't get smart, another week, and at the end, you'll be coming here till summer." "Till summer?" Andrew asked indignantly. "But I have plans." Mr. O'Leary smiled evilly and said, "You'll have to cancel them. Mental health is more important." So, doing nothing turned into daily essays of several pages. And if Mr. O'Leary didn't like what we wrote, we had to redo it. We were beginning to hate him. Why does he need these essays anyway? Does he really read them? Doesn't he have anything else to do? It was hard to concentrate on anything. All I could think about was Susan and Matt. I decided a long time ago that Matt deserved to be punished too. I think I had even written about it in an essay, and did illustrations where a piano randomly falls on Matt. I don't know how that was supposed to help us, because personally, I didn't get any kinder. I don't know about the other guys. We didn't communicate with each other at first. There was nothing in common between us, except for studying at school. Athlete, botanist, princess, hooligan, and crazy. What can we talk about? But the fatigue of writing essays every day led us, as a united front, to turn against Mr. O'Leary. He didn't think to slow down and came up with new assignments. For example, each of us had to write an essay about our main personal problem. None of us wanted to share our experiences with a man like O'Leary. So we defiantly wrote nothing that day. Andrew brought cards and we played for 3 hours. During the game, we talked, and I found out why Brian, John, and Allison were sent here. The quiet-looking nerd couldn't accept that anyone could be smarter than him. He lashed out at the teacher with insults for finding a mistake in his homework. Allison hated anyone who was poorer than she was. And John, at times, got star sickness. At the end of the day, a disgruntled O'Leary, red with anger, yelled at us. "It's a riot! And the riot must be stopped! I see you don't want to get better!" At some point, I forgot about Susan and my personal revenge, and now I was mad at my teacher. Something had to be done about it. The 5 of us came to the conclusion that no one else wanted to go to O'Leary's, so we came up with a plan. Mr. O'Leary, who was supposed to help us deal with anger, was insane himself, and he yelled at us all the time. At times, he didn't even skimp on insults, so we had to provoke him skillfully. On next day, Mr. O'Leary, as usual, gave us an assignment, took our phones, and went to his office. While he was gone, we tore up our sheets and scattered the things the teacher had left all over the library. We turned up the music at full volume. Andrew sneaked the phone he stole from his sister. Then we started dancing on the tables. Andrew also brought a printed portrait of Mr. O'Leary, and we threw darts at him, which I had already bought. At one point, Mr. O'Leary burst into the room. Our insolence made him speechless at first. The place where the class was being held looked as if a hurricane had swept through. He thought he'd scared us off once and for all. And then he burst out. I will not reproduce his speech here verbatim, but believe me, there was a lot of unpleasant stuff in it. Things that no teacher should allow himself. Then, he looked at Andrew standing on the table and shouted at him, "Get down, or I'll get you down myself!" Andrew stood there as if nothing had happened. "Get down!" Mr. O'Leary shouted even louder, but Andrew ignored him again. Then, the teacher came closer, and Andrew jumped over to another table. We stood and laughed as O'Leary ran from one table to the other, trying to grab Andrew. Andrew, after all, jumped off the table. Then, Mr. O'Leary went up to him and swung at him. The whole thing was filmed on a swiped phone by Brian. A recording of the teacher almost hitting the student went to the principal. The principal had no choice but to fire Mr. O'Leary. It was a personal victory for us. We were nevertheless released, and we went back to our regular schoolwork. It felt like we were truly imprisoned by some psychopath. I'd forgotten all about Susan and Matt. I had new friends now. Strangely enough, I was no longer angry at the world. Yes, I was still unstoppable and willful, but I wasn't throwing myself at anyone. After a while, I even started dating Andrew. He stopped being a bully too. I guess he was afraid he was going to turn into someone like Mr. O'Leary. Surprisingly, the classes helped. We were able to deal with the anger and find ourselves. How do you deal with anger attacks? Write your answers in the comments. Like the video and share it with your friends.